To keep her, I told a lie. I said my world was anchored to her, that once she betrayed me, I would be erased by the world and disappear completely. She believed it for 3 years, until her Prince Charming returned to the country. In front of everyone, she wrapped her arm around that man and asked me with open disdain, "Why haven't you disappeared yet?" At that moment, a system voice that had been silent for ages rang out in my head. Detected. World anchor loyalty has dropped to 0. Anchor released. Host, would you like to initiate the final transfer program and return to your original world? Chapter 1. The candlelight dinner for our 3rd wedding anniversary took me an entire afternoon to prepare. Diana's favorite beef Wellington, made with top-grade filet air-freighted from Australia, cooked medium, perfectly pink when sliced, juices flowing freely. On the side were black truffle sauce and French-baked escargots, along with a bottle of her beloved 1982 Lafite. On the table, freshly cut Corolla roses stood in a crystal vase, each bloom vivid and dewy, releasing a rich, cloying fragrance. I untied my apron and glanced at the Patek Philippe on my wrist. The hour hand had already pointed to 8. Diana was an hour late. I sent her a message. "The food's getting cold. Are you still on the way?" The message vanished into the void. No reply. I was already used to it. Ever since Hudson returned to the country half a year ago, Diana's being busy and running late had become routine. I sat quietly across the dining table, watching the untouched candle slowly burn down. Wax dripped and pooled, solidifying into something misshapen and ugly. The heat from the steak dissipated. The surface began to turn dry and tough. At 9:30, the villa's door lock chimed electronically. I stood up. The smile I had prepared didn't even have time to form before it froze on my face. Diana was back, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man, tall and well-built, dressed in a perfectly tailored beige trench coat. His brows and eyes carried a detached arrogance. Hudson, her university classmate, the Prince Charming she had hidden deep in her heart, and the greatest accident in my conquest mission. Diana held onto Hudson's arm, her fingertips even tracing lightly across the back of his hand, an intimacy I had never once been given. She saw me, and the carefully prepared dinner spread across the table. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a flicker of annoyance. "Jordan, why are you still up?" Her tone was flat, as if she were speaking to an irrelevant roommate. Hudson's gaze swept over me once before settling on the table. The corner of his mouth lifted in a playful smirk. "Well, Mr. Lopez, this is quite the spread. Is this a late-night snack you prepared for us?" My eyes fixed on the hand Diana had looped through his arm. It felt as though an invisible hand had clenched around my heart, not painful, just enough to make it hard to breathe. "Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. Diana paused for a moment, then impatience surfaced on her face. "I forgot. The company's been hectic lately. Hudson just got back, and I have to help him manage the gallery too. I'm completely swamped." She couldn't even be bothered to come up with a more believable excuse. I looked at her, the woman I had spent a full 5 years conquering. The system had told me that as long as her affection and loyalty stayed above 90, I could remain in this world forever and enjoy everything that came with a successful mission, wealth, status, and her. To secure that forever, after the conquest was complete, I told her a secret, half joking, half serious. "I don't actually belong to this world," I whispered in her ear that night, holding her close. "My existence is bound to you. If you betray me and fall in love with someone else, my anchor will disappear, and I'll be completely erased by this world." Back then, she had curled up in my arms, giggling, her soft body pressed against mine as she spoke in a sweet, gentle voice. "How could I ever bear to let you leave me? We'll be together forever." Forever, it turned out, had a shelf life of only 3 years. "Jordan," Hudson suddenly spoke. He took a step forward, sizing me up with a scrutinizing gaze, his tone laced with contempt and provocation. "I heard Diana say you told her that if she betrayed you, you'd disappear." My breathing stalled. Diana turned her face away, as if embarrassed, but she didn't refute it. Hudson's smile grew even more brazen. "Then why are you still standing here?" He took Diana's hand and raised it between the two of us, as if displaying a trophy. "Look, Diana chose me. Shouldn't you have gone poof by now?" Turned into a puff of smoke and vanished. His friends burst into laughter along with him. Only then did I realize she hadn't come back alone. A group of people stood in the shadows of the porch, now stepping forward, treating this place like an entertaining spectacle. "Hudson, don't say that," Diana said perfunctorily. With no real intention of stopping him, she looked at me, her eyes filled with icy disgust. "Jordan, I've had enough," she finally exploded. "Can you stop using these ridiculous lies to emotionally blackmail me? Disappearing? Anchors? There's no such magical nonsense in this world. Lying just to tie me down, don't you think that's pathetic, shameless? So disgusting," she snapped, as if tearing apart all the pretense of the past 3 years. "You said you'd disappear, but you're the one who wants to cling to me 24 hours a day. Your kind of love makes me suffocate." Every word was like a blade dipped in ice. striking with precision at my most vulnerable places. I looked at her, at the beautiful face now filled with a revulsion I had never seen before. I looked at Hudson beside her, wearing the unmistakable posture of a victor. I looked at the surrounding eyes, eager for drama. I felt no pain in my heart, only a hollow ringing. I looked at her as if she were a faded painting. When the conquest mission was completed, the system had rewarded me with 50 billion in assets, a world-leading game company, and permanent residency in this world. I handed the company over to professional managers and stepped behind the scenes, washing my hands of ambition to cook for her, to be the perfect husband. I bought her this top-floor mansion overlooking the entire city's nightscape, because she said she liked watching the stars. I opened a Michelin 3-star restaurant for her and named it Moonlight Kitchen, because she said she loved the food I made. Everything I did for her, in her eyes, was nothing more than a way to tie her down. A disgusting entanglement. So this was the truth. Love obtained through conquest was nothing but an illusion, like a reflection in a mirror or the moon on water. Amid the noisy laughter, the long silent system voice rang clearly in my mind. Warning, world anchor Diana, loyalty has dropped to 0%. Anchor lock released. Host Jordan, your legal residency in this world is about to expire. Would you like to initiate the final transfer program and return to your original world? Countdown, 72 hours. I took a deep breath. The oppressive heaviness in my chest vanished strangely. I lifted my head and met Diana's icy gaze, the corner of my mouth slowly curving into a smile, one she had never seen before. Distant, indifferent. All right, I said softly. Both Diana and Hudson froze. What did you say? Diana frowned. I'll grant your wish. I looked at her and spoke each word clearly. As you want it. I will disappear. Then, in my mind, I gave the system its command. Initiate the program. 72-hour countdown started. Phase 1 of the program, asset liquidation, initiated. Chapter 2. When Diana woke up the next morning, the space beside her was empty and cold, without the slightest trace of having been slept in. Her head throbbed from a hangover, rubbing her temples. She sat up and noticed how unnaturally neat the master bedroom was. In the walk-in closet, Jordan's half, every piece of clothing, every watch, every accessory, was gone, as if this person had never lived here at all. A flicker of unease crossed Diana's mind, but it was quickly replaced by irritation. Playing the runaway act again, she scoffed, picking up her phone. She had gone wild the night before, drinking in the living room with Hudson and their friends until late. Hudson had been sent home by his friends in the end, while she herself had passed out on the sofa. Had Jordan carried her back to the bedroom? She couldn't remember. All she remembered was Jordan's strange smile, and that sentence, I will disappear. Now it seemed like nothing more than a childish tantrum from a man humiliated after his lies were exposed. Unbothered, she walked into the bathroom to get ready, when her phone suddenly vibrated. An official email from the Real Estate Transaction Center. Dear Ms. Diana, the property jointly registered under your name and Mr. Jordan, located at Garden 1, Building A, top floor unit, has been unilaterally placed into an emergency sale process by Mr. Jordan. According to Clause 17 of the prenuptial agreement, unilateral disposal rights of gifted assets. Mr. Jordan is legally entitled to sell the property at any price without requiring your consent. The property has now been listed at 30% of the current market value and entered the fast-track transaction channel. Diana's mind went completely blank. 30% of market price. Was he insane? This house had been purchased by Jordan when they got married. It was worth 300 million. Both their names were on the deed. But since Jordan had paid in full, there really was an additional clause in the prenuptial agreement, one she hadn't even bothered to read at the time. She had always thought it was just meaningless paperwork. She immediately dialed Jordan's number. What answered her was a cold, mechanical female voice. The number you have dialed is powered off. She then sent him a message through social media. A red exclamation mark popped up. You have been blocked by this user. A sense of panic she had never felt before spread rapidly from the bottom of her heart, like creeping vines. This wasn't Jordan's style. In the past, no matter how unreasonable she was during their arguments, he would at most go silent for a day. The very next morning, he would always prepare breakfast and smile at her as if nothing had happened. He never turned off his phone, and he never blocked her. Diana didn't even bother washing up. She hurriedly changed clothes and rushed out of the bedroom. The living room had already been cleaned up from last night's mess, though a faint smell of alcohol still lingered in the air. The bouquet of white roses Hudson had given her had been casually tossed into the trash can, the petals already wilting. Restless and agitated, she kicked the trash can and immediately called her lawyer. Lawyer Oscar, Jordan is selling our house. You have to find a way to stop him. There was a brief silence on the other end before the lawyer replied in a heavy tone. Ms. Diana, I'm afraid that will be difficult. This prenuptial agreement carries full legal force. Mr. Lopez's actions are lawful, and at a 30% price, the property will attract a large number of buyers within 24 hours. Once a contract is signed, There will be no turning back. How could this happen? Diana's hand trembled as she gripped the phone. Suddenly, Diana remembered something. She rushed to the safe by the entryway and frantically entered the code. The safe opened, empty. The property deeds, her jewelry, several important documents, all gone. No, one thing was left behind. A small velvet box. With trembling hands, Diana opened it. Inside was the diamond ring Jordan had used to propose to her, Eternal Heart. Pressed beneath the ring was a note, written in Jordan's bold, unrestrained handwriting. A keepsake. That single line felt like a loud slap across her face. This wasn't a fit of anger. It felt more like a farewell, cold, deliberate, and cruelly calm. Just then, her phone rang again. It was her best friend. Her voice filled with shock. Diana, check the news. Moonlight Kitchen has announced permanent closure. Diana's mind buzzed. She immediately opened the financial news. The front page headline, stark and black, was impossible to ignore. Michelin 3-star legend comes to an end. Moonlight Kitchen, founder announces permanent shutdown. All employees receive triple annual salary compensation. Moonlight Kitchen, Jordan's wedding gift to her, because she had said she wanted to eat his cooking whenever she liked. He had built this temple of fine dining just for her. The restaurant didn't accept public reservations. It served only her and her friends. It was the center of her social circle, the ultimate embodiment of her vanity. Countless socialites had fought tooth and nail just to get an invitation from Diana, to dine there once, to take a photo. Now, it was gone. In the news footage, the restaurant's general manager bowed deeply to the camera. This was Mr. Lopez's decision. He stated that the original purpose for opening the restaurant no longer exists. Therefore, there is no reason to continue. The purpose no longer exists. Diana collapsed onto the cold floor. Her phone slipped from her fingers. She suddenly remembered Hudson's contemptuous laughter the night before, and her own words, disgusting. Panic, overwhelming panic, flooded her like a rising tide. Jordan hadn't been joking. He really was, disappearing from her world, little by little. Chapter 3. After the panic came towering rage. Diana was convinced Jordan was using these extreme measures to force her to give in, to make her regret it. Who does he think he is? She screamed into the phone at her best friend. Does he really think I can't live without his house and his restaurant? Her friend tried to calm her down carefully. Diana, don't get angry yet. This time, Jordan seemed serious. Maybe you said things a little too harshly. I was telling the truth. Diana shrieked. How has he treated me these past 3 years? Always monitoring me, interfering in everything. He had to know my schedule, review my friends, calling it concern, when it was really just control. I've had enough. She hung up, took several deep breaths, and forced herself to calm down. She still had Hudson. She pulled out her phone and called him, her voice instantly turning soft and aggrieved. Hudson, Jordan, he's selling the house, and he shut down the restaurant too. Hudson paused on the other end, then comforted her in an easy, relaxed tone. So he sold it. So he closed it. A place reeking of a control freak's presence isn't worth staying in anyway. This is perfect. We can finally start our own new life. But, no buts, baby. Hudson cut her off. Don't you remember? My gallery opens next week. When that happens, you'll be the most dazzling hostess in the room. What glory does some shabby restaurant have compared to being the owner's woman at an art gallery? Hudson's sweet talk worked like a sedative, smoothing much of the chaos in Diana's mind. That's right. She still had Hudson. Hudson was an artist, romantic, free-spirited, not like Jordan, who was wrapped in the dull smoke of everyday life. Can you come over this afternoon? Diana asked, her voice tinged with tears. I'm alone at home. I'm a little scared. Of course, I'll be there right away. After hanging up, Diana felt much better. She even began to think that Jordan's departure might be a good thing. She could finally escape that suffocating love and start a brand new life with Hudson. She changed into a white dress Hudson liked, put on flawless makeup, and sat in the living room waiting for him. But the people who arrived were not Hudson. They were a group of movers in uniform. The foreman at the front held up an electronic contract. Excuse me, are you Ms. Diana? We're from One Day Clear Moving Company. We've been commissioned by Mr. Jordan to clear out all personal property from this apartment. Diana jumped to her feet. What are you doing? This is my home. The foreman expressionlessly presented the authorization letter and Jordan's electronically signed approval. Mr. Lopez has already auctioned off all furniture, artworks, and stored wine in this property, excluding your personal clothing, at 10% of their value through online channels. Our job is to clear everything out by 5 p.m. today and hand the apartment over to the new owner. 10%. Diana's voice trembled. The genuine leather sofa she had custom ordered from Italy, the antique painting on the wall worth tens of millions, the rare vintage wines in the cellar that Jordan had scoured the world to collect for her, all of it, sold off like trash, at a tenth of its value. Get out, all of you, get out. Diana shrieked hysterically, lunging forward to shove the workers. A man in a suit standing beside the foreman stepped forward and handed her a business card. "Ma'am, I am Mr. Lopez's legal representative. If you obstruct the execution of this contract, we will file a lawsuit against you for interfering with property transfer. In addition, this is a court injunction. Before the property handover is completed, you are prohibited from damaging any items inside the residence in any way." Diana stared at the cold, impersonal injunction. The strength drained from her body in an instant. All she could do was watch helplessly as the workers, like a swarm of locusts, emptied the home she had lived in for 3 years, bit by bit. The sofa, the coffee table, the rugs, the television, the paintings on the walls, everything that bore Jordan's imprint, every trace of their shared life, was roughly packed up and carried away. In the end, even the large bed they had slept on for 3 years was dismantled and hauled out. At 4 in the afternoon, when the last worker left, the 300-square-meter luxury residence stood completely empty. Only the massive floor-to-ceiling windows remained, reflecting the gray, overcast sky outside. Diana stood in the middle of the ruined living room. Beneath her feet were scratches and dust left behind by the movers. The few suitcases of personal clothing she had brought into the marriage were piled alone in a corner, like unclaimed trash. Only then did she finally realize that Jordan wasn't trying to force her to give in. He was erasing every trace of his existence. Her phone rang at the worst possible moment. It was Hudson. "Baby, I'm sorry, something came up here. I can't make it over," he said, sounding a little rushed. "There's a problem with one of the gallery's investors. I need to go smooth things over." Diana asked numbly. "What kind of problem?" "Ugh, don't even ask. The $5 million investment we had basically secured suddenly fell through. I've got to look for other options fast." Hudson sighed, then added, "By the way, how are things on your end? Jordan hasn't given you any more trouble, has he?" Diana looked around at this hollow shell of a home. Her lips moved, but not a single word came out. What could she say? That she was now homeless, penniless. Most of her credit cards were Jordan's secondary cards. Now that the primary account had been cancelled, her cards were nothing more than useless pieces of plastic. I'm fine," she heard herself say, her voice dry and lifeless. "That's good. Then, stay put for now. Once I settle the investment issue, I'll take you to the best hotel and buy you the prettiest bags to make it up to you." Hudson's tone slipped back into its familiar, frivolous sweetness. After hanging up, Diana slowly crouched down, wrapping her arms around her knees. In the vast, empty room, there was only the sound of her own breathing and the howling wind outside the windows. A loneliness, as if she had been abandoned by the entire world, swallowed her whole. Chapter 4. System notification. Asset liquidation complete. All personal assets of the host have been converted into system points. Program Phase 2, Social Relationship Severance, initiated. I sat in a standard budget hotel room, watching the steady flow of traffic outside the window. On my phone were messages from my lawyer. "Mr. Lopez, the property transfer has been completed successfully. As per your instructions, half of the proceeds have been donated to a rural children's education fund under the name Diana. The other half has been transferred to the overseas account you designated. All employee severance and compensation matters for Moonlight Kitchen have been fully settled. All shares under your name in Cosmos Technology have been transferred. The proceeds have also been handled accordingly." In the span of a single day, I went from being a powerful figure in this city to a penniless, ordinary person. On the system panel, a long string of point values flickered continuously. These points would be more than enough for me to live an even more comfortable life after returning to my original world. Yet my heart was completely calm. I opened a concealed app. On the screen appeared a live surveillance feed from the Garden 1 penthouse. I had installed it long ago, just in case. In the footage, Diana was curled up alone in a corner of the empty living room, like an abandoned kitten, without her refined makeup, without that air of arrogance. She looked fragile and helpless. I watched her with an expressionless face. The system's mission had required me to conquer her, to make myself fall in love with her. I did. I thought that after the mission's success, I would gain genuine affection, a stable home. Now I understood. From beginning to end, this had only ever been a transaction. I was the player. She was an NPC. Now that the game was over, it was time for me to leave the stage. I closed the surveillance feed and deleted the app. From this moment on, her joys and sorrows had nothing to do with me. System notification, severing all non-essential social connections in this world. Contacts, social networks, bank accounts, identity information being erased one by one. Estimated time, 48 hours. My phone began automatically deleting contacts, logging out of every social account, canceling memberships and subscriptions. One familiar name after another vanished. One memory after another was wiped away. Finally, the screen went black. The phone reduced to nothing more than a useless slab of metal. The world became quiet, unprecedentedly so. Elsewhere, Diana sat alone in the empty house for an entire night. The next day, The new homeowner came to the door and politely asked her to leave, dragging 2 suitcases. Diana stood in a daze at the entrance of Garden 1, looking around helplessly. Where could she go? Back to her parents' home. She had fallen out with her family over marrying Jordan and hadn't contacted them for 2 years. A hotel. Only then did she realize that aside from her phone and a few now invalid credit cards, she didn't even have a single dollar in cash on her. She had no choice but to call Hudson again. This time, the phone rang for a long while before it was answered. Hello. Hudson's voice was impatient. The background was noisy, like a KTV. Hudson, I don't have anywhere to go. Diana's pride made the words hard to say. What do you mean nowhere to go? Your place is huge. The house. Jordan sold it. I've been kicked out. Silence fell on the other end. After a long while, Hudson finally spoke. Then just find a hotel to stay in. What's the big deal? I don't have any money, Diana said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. No money? Hudson's tone shot up instantly. How is that possible? Jordan's loaded. Didn't you get tens of billions in a divorce settlement? We're not divorced, and all my cards have been frozen. Another long silence. Diana could hear a woman on the other end calling out coquettishly. Young Master Hudson, come drink with us. Her heart sank, inch by inch. Well then, Hudson finally said, his tone now tinged with condescension. I'll have my assistant send you $50,000. Use it to get settled somewhere first. I'm really busy right now. The investment situation isn't going well, and I have to entertain these investors properly. Try to figure things out on your own for now. Okay. Without waiting for her reply, he hung up, standing on the bustling street with her phone in hand. Diana felt like a joke. This was the romance and freedom she had given up everything for. An hour later, a young assistant found her and shoved an envelope into her hands. His eyes filled with undisguised contempt. Miss, this is from Boss Hudson. He says money's tight for him lately too, so you should spend it sparingly. With that, the assistant turned and left, as if staying a second longer would soil him. Diana clutched the thin envelope. Inside were $50,000 in cash. Once upon a time, $50,000 wasn't even enough for her to buy the most ordinary handbag. Now, it was everything she had. The overwhelming sense of humiliation and absurdity made her almost unable to stand. She suddenly wanted to find Jordan, to ask him why he was treating her like this. She took a taxi to the headquarters of Cosmos Technology. She remembered that although Jordan didn't manage daily operations, he would occasionally come by, but the receptionist stopped her with a professional smile. Sorry, ma'am, there is no employee named Jordan at our company. That's impossible. Diana panicked. He's your boss, the company's founder. Ma'am, the founder of our company is Mr. Cruz, and the chairman is Mr. Gonzalez. There has never been a Mr. Lopez listed among our executives. The receptionist's smile remained flawless, but a hint of wariness appeared in her eyes. Diana refused to believe it. She rushed to the wall displaying the founders' profiles in the lobby. The photo that had once shown Jordan at the height of his confidence was gone. In its place was the face of a middle-aged man she had never seen before. The name beneath it had also changed, to Mason. How could this be? As if driven mad, she began searching online for Jordan and Cosmos Technology. Every piece of news, every report, every interview that had once identified Jordan as the founder of Cosmos Technology had vanished. All that remained was that man named Mason. As though every trace of Jordan's existence within this business empire had been wiped away by an invisible hand, erased out of thin air. Chapter 5. Diana refused to accept it. She went to every restaurant they had ever dined at, every mall they had strolled through, every cinema they had sat in together. She tried to extract even the faintest trace of Jordan's existence from the mouths of clerks and managers, but the results chilled her to the bone. Mr. Lopez, sorry, we have no purchase records for that guest. I don't remember anyone like that at all. Miss, are you sure you're not mistaken? Haven't you always come with Hudson? Everyone had forgotten Jordan, as if this person existed only in her memory. No, even her memory was starting to blur. She desperately tried to recall the details of being with Jordan, but many scenes felt as though they were covered in fog. Impossible to see clearly. She remembered his back as he cooked for her. She remembered the tenderness in his eyes when he looked at her. She remembered the warmth of his chest when he pulled her into his arms. But his face, his voice, were fading rapidly. This terrified her far more than a simple breakup. Wasn't this exactly what Jordan had meant by disappearing? Not physical death, but the complete erasure of every proof that he had ever existed in this world. She finally believed it. That superpower she had once dismissed as a ridiculous lie was real, and it was she who had personally activated this program. It was she who had personally erased the men who loved her most from this world. Bit by bit, regret, like poison, began to gnaw at her from the inside out. With the $50,000, she rented a remote, cramped apartment. She stopped contacting Hudson. She stopped contacting those so-called friends. Every day, All she did was hold the velvet box containing the eternal heart and watch her wedding video with Jordan over and over again. It was the only proof of him that hadn't disappeared. In the video, Jordan wore a perfectly tailored suit, so handsome it made her heart race. Standing before the priest, he looked at her with eyes full of inescapable devotion and tenderness. I, Jordan, take Diana to be my lawful wife. From this day forward, whether in good times or bad, in wealth or poverty, in health or sickness, I will love you, cherish you, until death parts us. His voice came through the screen, every word firm and resolute. Diana's heart was struck hard. Until death parts us, she murmured, tears instantly blurring her vision. In the video, she wore a pure white wedding dress, smiling with happiness, leaning against Jordan like a princess cherished by the entire world. And now, she sat alone in this rental room of less than 10 square meters. Mold mottled the walls. The air was thick with dampness and the cheap smell of instant noodles. Death hadn't separated them. She had done it herself, personally severed that vow. She turned off the video and clutched the velvet box tightly, as if it were the only piece of driftwood keeping her afloat in this cold world. She opened it. Under the dim light, the eternal heart still shone with brilliant radiance. Trembling, she slid the ring onto her ring finger. The icy touch made her shudder. No, she couldn't give up like this. Jordan had said that disappearing meant erasing all traces. As long as he hadn't completely vanished, there had to be a way. She had to find him. She had to apologize to him in person, beg for his forgiveness, and beg him to stop this terrifying program. Chapter 6. Early the next morning, Diana used what little money she had left to buy a bus ticket to the suburban industrial district. She remembered Jordan once telling her that he had an old private studio there. It was a place he had rented during the early days of his startup. Even after the company took off, he had never given it up, saying it was where his original intention began. She had never gone there. She had found the place remote and run down. But now, it was her last hope. The bus rattled along. Outside the window, the scenery shifted from clusters of skyscrapers to low factory buildings and stretches of desolate grassland. Diana's heart sank with every passing mile. At the same time, inside the city's most exclusive private club, Hudson stood holding a wine glass, his face plastered with a smile as he addressed a pot-bellied middle-aged man. Boss Mao, my gallery concept is absolutely top tier in this country. As long as your funding comes through, I guarantee that within 6 months, it'll become the city's next art landmark. The man known as Boss Mao lazily swirled the whiskey in his glass, not even bothering to lift his eyelids. He let out a soft snort of laughter. Hudson, I've read your proposal. Big vision. Very pretty. He set his glass down and finally looked Hudson in the eye. But I also had someone look into your background. Hudson's smile stiffened. Those exhibitions you held overseas, weren't they all sponsored by Cosmos Technologies' European branch? Boss Mao's tone turned mocking. And that welcome back banquet Miss Diana threw for you after you returned. 7 figures in one night. Mr. Lopez paid the bill. As for the startup funds for your gallery, you claimed they were your own savings. But the bank records I found show the money came from a joint account belonging to Miss Diana and Mr. Lopez. Boss Mao leaned forward, his bloated face full of contempt. Mr. Hudson, isn't all this so-called artistic talent and elite network of yours built on Jordan's money? Now that Jordan has vanished and Cosmos Technology has changed hands, what exactly are you using to guarantee this new landmark of yours? He picked up his coat and stood, looking down at Hudson's ashen face. Let's be blunt. You're nothing more than a kept man living off a woman's connections. Back then, Mr. Lopez was willing to spend money to keep you around to amuse his wife. I don't have that kind of money, or patience. With that, he turned and left without a backward glance. The rich kids who had been crowding around Hudson just moments earlier now scattered like the plague, their eyes full of mockery and disdain. So he was just a gold digger. Thought he was some overseas art prodigy. What a joke. Hudson stood frozen in place, the wine glass trembling in his hand. His pride, his so-called talent and self-respect, was stripped bare in that instant, smashed onto the ground, and crushed underfoot. He suddenly hurled the glass to the floor, eyes bloodshot. He pulled out his phone and dialed Diana. He needed someone to blame, to pour all his resentment and failure onto. If it weren't for her uselessness, for her inability to hold on to Jordan, how could he have fallen this far? But what came from the other end was a cold, mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is currently on another call. He dialed again, the same voice. What he didn't know was that at this very moment, Diana was using her phone as a navigation device, searching for that place she had never once set foot in. Chapter 7. Diana searched through the abandoned industrial zone for a full 2 hours. Finally, in front of a rusted iron gate, she saw the familiar number on the doorplate. The lock had long since seized up. She had to struggle with all her strength just to push the door open a narrow crack. A long-sealed, stale smell rushed out to meet her. The studio wasn't large, but it was crammed with all kinds of electronic components, blueprints, and models she couldn't begin to understand. Everything here clashed violently with her refined, luxurious world. And yet, everywhere bore Jordan's traces. On the workbench sat a half-finished cup of coffee. In the ashtray beside it were several extinguished cigarette butts. The walls were covered edge to edge with game design sketches, dense with his bold, unrestrained handwritten notes. In the corner stood a half-assembled retro game console, its wiring still exposed. Diana stepped inside carefully, as if afraid of disturbing time itself. She ran her fingers over the cold surface of the workbench, imagining Jordan sitting here countless nights, staying up until dawn for the sake of his dreams. She had never known any of this. She only knew that he was rich, never how that money came to be. She enjoyed the wealth and comfort he brought her, yet despised the everyday grit about him, thinking he was inferior to Hudson, less romantic, less refined. How ridiculous, how pitiful. Inside a drawer of the workbench, she found a black, hard-covered notebook. She opened it, and her pupils shrank sharply. It wasn't a diary. It looked more like an experimental report. Mission target, Diana. Mission type, emotional conquest. Mission duration, 5 years. Mission reward, permanent world residency. 50 billion in system assets. Below it were dense, meticulous records. Year 1, target affection 30. Weakness, vanity. Enjoys being the center of attention. Strategy, create grand, romantic pursuit scenarios. Year 2, target affection 60. Weakness, lack of security. Craves exclusive devotion. Strategy, isolate from unhealthy social circles. Provide meticulous care. Year 5, target affection 95. Loyalty 92. Mission complete. Initiating long-term residency protocol. Diana turned the pages one by one, her entire body growing cold, as if she had fallen into an icy abyss. So everything between them, their meeting, their love, their marriage, had all been a carefully designed program. Every flutter of her heart, every moment she was moved, had been calculated. She had never been his lover. She was merely a mission target, an NPC. The overwhelming absurdity and fury of being deceived made her want to tear the notebook apart, but she didn't. She flipped to the very last page. The date was from just a few days ago. World anchor Diana, loyalty reduced to 0. Long-term residency protocol invalid. Initiating final transfer program. Countdown, 72 hours. The handwriting was calm, objective, completely devoid of emotion. Diana's heart died completely. So even her final regret was nothing but self-indulgence. He had never loved her. His departure was merely an automatic procedure after mission failure. She laughed, and as she laughed, tears fell. Just as she was about to close the notebook and accept this cruel reality, her gaze was caught by a single line of small text at the very bottom of the page, written in a different handwriting. The line was messy, the ink slightly smudged, as if the person who wrote it had been emotionally unstable. But what if the player falls in love with the game itself? Those few words struck Diana's mind like a bolt of thunder. All the earlier calmness, restraint, and calculation collapsed in an instant before that single sentence. He wasn't heartless. He had fallen in love. The one who was supposed to be the player had, in the process of conquering an NPC, trapped himself instead. That was why he had told her the secret about the anchor, not to bind her, but because he was truly afraid of losing her. That was why he had left the ring behind, not as humiliation, but as his final attachment. That was why he had donated half the house's proceeds in her name. Was it his way of leaving her, a bit of virtue, a bit of protection? Diana could no longer hold it in. She collapsed over the workbench and broke down in sobs. More painful than being deceived was realizing that the other person had given his heart, and that she herself had crushed it underfoot. Chapter 8. System notification, social relationship severance complete. Final stage in progress, erasure of existence traces. Final transfer countdown, 00:10:00. I sat on the hotel bed, watching the last sliver of sunset sink beneath the horizon. 72 hours, almost up. The world I had lived in for 8 years was about to have nothing more to do with me. I felt no attachment, no reluctance, maybe just a little. That little bit belonged to a woman named Diana. The system said it was a program bug, data redundancy, but I knew better. It was my own choice. I chose to fall in love with her, and after her betrayal, I chose to end everything with my own hands. There was nothing to regret. Countdown, 00:01:00. I stood up and walked to the window. The city's neon lights flickered on, like multicolored rivers flowing through the night. I had once wanted to see all this splendor with her. Now, it was just me, making a final farewell. Countdown, 00:00:10, 9, 8, 7. At that moment, the backup phone in my pocket, one that should have long since run out of battery and shut down, suddenly began vibrating violently. I took it out. On the screen was neither a call nor a message. It was a forcibly popped-up window. Inside it was the surveillance feed from that long-abandoned studio. Diana was slumped over the desk, crying until she was nearly torn apart. In her hands, she clutched my black notebook tightly. She had found the place. She had seen that sentence. My heart, the heart I thought had already gone still like dead water, suddenly thudded hard, without warning. 3. I saw her lift her head. Her tear-streaked face was filled with endless despair and regret. She opened her mouth and silently called my name. 2. 1. Transfer program initiated. A burst of white light exploded before my eyes. Diana cried until she was on the verge of fainting. Suddenly, the phone she was using as a light flickered. All images vanished, replaced by a blood-red countdown. 0000:05. She froze. 0000:04. She understood instantly what it was. 0000:03. No, she screamed, her voice torn apart by despair. 0000:02. She jerked her head up, frantically scanning her surroundings, screaming hoarsely. Jordan, Jordan, come out. I was wrong. I really was wrong. 0000:01. At the instant the countdown hit 0, the air in the center of the studio suddenly rippled like water. A faint, nearly transparent human figure slowly emerged. It was Jordan. He wore a simple white shirt and black trousers, tall and composed, his expression calm. He stood there, his gaze passing straight through her, fixed on some void behind her. He couldn't see her. Jordan. Diana scrambled forward, trying to grab his hand. Her fingers passed through his body without resistance. He was like a phantom with no physical form. He no longer belonged to this world. A soft gate of light slowly opened behind him. He turned around. Without the slightest hesitation, he lifted his foot, ready to step into the light. Don't go. Diana fell to her knees, crying in utter despair. Please, don't leave me alone. That figure about to step into the light seemed to pause, ever so slightly, just a tenth of a second. Then, without looking back, he walked into the light. The gate closed. The figure vanished. The studio returned to deathly silence. Only Diana remained, alone amid the dust-filled room. The phone in her hand went completely dark. Jordan, and the very last trace of his existence in electronic form, had vanished entirely. Epilogue. 1 year later, in an ordinary neighborhood restaurant, a woman in a server's uniform was efficiently clearing tables. She had cut her hair short, wore no makeup, and her face carried a calmness tempered by life itself. It was Diana. After Jordan left, Hudson's debts came looking for her. She sold the ring, sold every piece of jewelry that could be turned into cash, and only then barely managed to pay everything off. She didn't return to her parents' home. She didn't contact any of her former friends. She took the most ordinary job, rented the cheapest room, and lived like an ordinary person. That day, after clearing the last table, she noticed a 100 yuan bill pressed beneath a plate as a tip. She smiled faintly and reached to put it away. Then she saw there was also a napkin underneath the bill. On it, drawn with a ballpoint pen, was a very simple, almost clumsy, smiley face. Diana froze. That smiley face, she remembered, long ago. When she had been sick, Jordan had coaxed her into taking medicine and had drawn exactly this kind of smiley face on a sticky note. Her heart clenched violently. She looked up, rushed to the door, and stared out at the busy street. Night stretched endlessly. There was no trace of that customer anywhere. Was it a coincidence? Or was it? She returned to the table and picked up the napkin carefully, as if holding an irreplaceable treasure. She stared at that smiley face for a very, very long time. Then she lowered her head. A single scorching tear fell onto the smiley face, spreading instantly. She knew that she would spend the rest of her life paying for the love she had destroyed with her own hands. Bonus scene. In a pure white space, with no sky and no ground, Jordan stood before an enormous holographic screen. On the screen was a frozen image of Diana, tears streaming down her face. A cold, emotionless electronic female voice sounded. Earth No. 73B World Experience mission has concluded. Overall mission evaluation, S+. Comment, player Jordan successfully completed the conquest and, after Anchor betrayal, activated the decisive departure protocol, meeting the highest standard of satisfying cruelty. Warning, non-essential emotional linkage, love, detected. This data bug has been recorded. Jordan stared expressionlessly at the screen, lifted a floating glass of blue liquid beside him, and took a sip. That smiley face on the napkin. He asked calmly, "Was that your doing?" System, according to emotional model projections, this action can raise the target's regret value to its peak and permanently lock it in, contributing to a higher final mission score. Is that so? Jordan's tone revealed no emotion. System, player Jordan, would you like to initiate the memory formatting procedure to erase the emotional data bug generated during this mission? Jordan looked at the woman silently crying in the small restaurant on the screen for a long time. The space fell completely silent. No, he finally said. his voice very soft. Leave it. System, command confirmed. Jordan turned away, no longer looking at the screen. Get things ready, he said. Start the next mission.